My name is Sara Smith-Silverman. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is October 27th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My name is Alexander Penniger. My date of birth is, I might be answering these out of order. My pronouns are he, him. My birthday is April 3rd, 1993. And what was the last question? Oh my gosh, I'm so
I
sorry.
think you said your name, your pronouns, and date of birth. You got it.
Okay,
So
sorry, I
that
can also
makes
start
you,
that over.
you're 30?
Yes.
Tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
So I really, really enjoy doing artwork. I do a lot of reading, but mainly queer history. I write, I do poetry, I do short story fiction. I just dabble in a bunch of different hobbies. I am always busy. Maybe that's part of the ADHD. I kind of have the audacity to try literally any hobby. So a little bit of anything crafty.
You said you read a lot of queer history.
I do.
Any anything you've read recently that you really liked?
Yes. I believe the author's name was Kit Hayman. It was Before We Were Trans. That book was really good.
Why did you like that? Because I saw that book recently and I thought I should pick it up and read it.
I feel that the I don't know, like in my personal opinion, I feel that they did a really good job at showing it through a not a very structured binary lens. Like they broke down this social construct of gender in a way that I've not seen done in other trans history books. And it was really interesting because it opens up talking about like the way gender is viewed in the eyes of the law and the way crimes were documented and the erasure of trans history by just putting people in these binary boxes. And it really opens up the idea that our history is more it's more rich and deep than what we are even aware of right now, because of the way documentation of our history has just completely erased us. And I thought that the way it was portrayed was did a really good job.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm definitely going to read that book and recommend it to others. Um, so, where did you grow up and where do you live now?
So I grew up in Missouri, southern Missouri, and then we moved around a lot. But then we were in North Carolina and then California.
And where do you live now?
Oh, California. So Sacramento, California.
And where do you currently attend college and what do you study?
So I am at American River College and I was studying psychology. I just recently switched my major to sociology, and my other major is women's and gender studies.
And what made you decide to major in sociology and women and gender studies?
The major switch or just in general?
The switch and then in
Okay.
general, whatever you want to say.
So my overall goal has been to work with the LGBTQ plus community, especially considering like I've had so many experiences I don't want to see other people going through, and I want to go into social work because of that. And I thought that psychology was the correct major to choose until my counselor, she said to me, "You're very human services oriented," because I've been in her classes before. She's familiar with like my essays, and she asked me what I thought about a sociology major and explained the difference. And I was like, "Oh, that makes a lot more sense." And I took her advice. She thought that for my long term career goals, because I I would like to work towards becoming a licensed clinical social worker, and she felt that this might be more in line with what I want to do long term. So I took her up on that, and I was like, okay, let's do the switch. So that's pretty much it.
And then women and gender studies, does that mean you are pursuing that through social justice studies?
Yes.
And why did you decide to do that?
I didn't even know it was an option until my counselor told me about it. And I felt that it would be really helpful because I want to work specifically with the LGBTQ plus community. And so that's pretty much it. It's just kind of going like that direction of, where my dreams are at. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to actually accomplish it, but I would love to have a nonprofit organization, maybe even leaving California and reaching out to communities that don't have the same support that we have here. And I would like to take my education that I've gotten here in California and take it elsewhere. But that's so long term. I'm in my first year of community college. This plan could change a million times, but my heart has always been really set on working with the LGBTQ plus community.
And so this is your first semester.
No, it's my
Okay.
first year.
How did you start last
Yeah,
spring?
yeah. I started last spring, and so far, I'm really thankful that I went back to school.
And why did you choose community college?
Um, it was cost efficient, and it was something. So it was financially accessible for me, and it was close to home, and I had been I've been putting it off for a really long time. My self esteem is really bad, and I thought that I was too stupid to go to college, and I finally, with enough encouragement and support, I finally went. I enrolled, and I'm gonna say it's probably one of the best decisions I've made.
And where do you hope to transfer to if that's your goal?
Sac State or UC Davis.
Um, so do you take classes online or in person or some combo of the
Uh,
two?
this semester, I'm doing a combo, so I am taking Intro to LGBTQ plus studies online, and then I have a public speaking class on campus. So I'm only in two classes this semester.
And why did you choose to only take two classes?
Working and also being disabled and in school is a lot, so I decided to be kind to myself and not completely burn out. Pretty much that.
Um, so can you tell me about how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking?
Like my transness.
So let's do all of the everything under the sun.
Okay.
Race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender,
Okay.
ability, disability, religion,
Oh,
neurodiversity,
that's a
class.
loaded question.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot there.
So I'm gay, I'm trans, and I feel that both of those things are very intertwined for me. And because it's interesting how much my sexuality brings me so much gender euphoria, and I can't separate the two for some reason for myself personally. And as far as race, I am not really connected to culture. Although I'm part Native American, I didn't get the opportunity to grow up in the same culture as my cousins and so on. So I missed out on that. So I don't really have that deep connection. And so I don't really have much to say on that because I didn't grow up within a specific culture. And let's see, other parts of my, well, being disabled is also a huge part of who I am. I am autistic. I have ADHD, and that really, sorry, I have a little bit of anxiety that came up. Sorry. Would I be able to start this one over?
Sure, we can edit this. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was just like, oh no, I don't know which one to answer in what order. Um, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Um,
That's okay. Why don't you just continue if you're okay with where you were going? You were talking about
okay,
disability and
yeah.
neurodiversity.
So, yeah, I feel that some of the main parts of my identity, especially ones that people see that are the most visible, being my, I feel like my gender and sexuality is very visible, and I'm very loud about it. but I'm also autistic. And even though some people don't notice it, some people are kind of dismissive. It is something that I don't hide. And I've been learning in recent years to how to ask for accommodations and so on. And I think that makes me significantly more visible. And so, but it's all like every single bit of it is all intertwined together. And there's so many parts of my identity that I can't separate. And I don't know, I think that's kind of a cool thing though. Because like my transness and, being autistic, I feel that they are also intertwined because being autistic helped me process gender. It helped me be able to break down these boxes and view things on a bigger picture outside lens in ways that my holistic peers are not able to. And that helped me with exploring my gender identity and my sexuality. And not only that, but helped me with coming to terms with it and finding labels for it um, in a way that was effective for me. So I do feel that like being gay, trans, and autistic, they're just so intertwined.
Um, so I'll ask some follow-up questions about that a little later, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I have a whole section about um, neurodiversity and disability. But anything else you want to say about disabilities right now?
Um, so I have physical disabilities as well. Those parts of me are not really that visible. People don't see that side of my identity. And my disabilities don't really look the way that I think society imagines disabilities do. Having dysautonomia, having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, like people look at me and they think that I'm very physical, able-bodied, and I'm not. And so I feel like that's something that is really hard to advocate for as well. And there's been a lot of, I'm probably going to end up on a tangent here with, the neurodiversity movement and then just acceptance of mental health. Like we've made a lot of strides forward, but like currently in my life, I feel like I have to push harder to get accommodations physically because people don't recognize invisible disabilities.
Can you elaborate on what those disabilities are exactly?
Yeah, so dysautonomia, there's different types, but it's basically the autonomic nervous system is not communicating properly. So my heart rate will spike and my blood pressure will drop and I pass out. So they suspect that the type that I have is POTS, so it's partial orthostatic tachycardia. I always struggle to say the last word. Um, but it's abbreviated to POTS. And then Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, it is a genetic condition. It affects basically the ligaments and my collagen, and so my joints aren't that stable. But it's very hand in hand with dysautonomia, causes chronic fatigue, pain, and so on. Sometimes people get misdiagnosed with fibromyalgia instead of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it's basically, I know this is gonna sound silly. It's kind of a broken body syndrome, because it's just like the way it manifests is it just makes your body do really weird things, and it can be very unpredictable. So like, oh, well, I guess my ribs just slid out of place. Oh, I dislocated my shoulder. Oops, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you talked about the interconnectedness of being autistic, and I'll ask you more about that. But
Mhm.
in trans, is there anything you want to say on the in the same vein about your disabilities?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's really. Give me just a second. I'm trying to think how to explain it. I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of like I'm this melting pot of like all of these things about me, and even though I'm not my disabilities impact my life so much that it's shaped me as who I am, and I feel that that has a part to play. And then also, even though my transness and my gayness don't have anything to do with my physical disabilities, it's just it's all a part of me, and I have to recognize each individual part and making the whole of who I am. And I don't view it as I don't know. I probably stumbled on my words there a little bit. That one's a kind of a hard one to answer. I'm not gonna lie. Like yeah, I had. It's really interesting. I don't really think a lot about my physical disabilities in that way. Usually, I think about it in terms of like this is something so separate. So now I kind of like now I'm having to like go back and like question myself. Like, oh, do I really feel that all the parts of myself are, who I am? Oh, I'm now having like all this introspective thought. I'm so sorry. So I'm not sure. I don't know how to really answer that one.
Well, I think they interviewed a couple of students who also had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yeah, it's really common with autism. And there's some type of correlation. And I'm in like support groups for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and autism comes up a lot. And then in my autism groups, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome comes up a lot. And I know that I can't recall them off the top of my head, but there's been a few studies done that there might be a link, but I don't think it's 100% confirmed. I don't want to like tell you incorrect information, but it's interesting working at the Pride Center. A lot of autistic students come in and we'll start bonding over both having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And that actually happened to me the other day, and I was like, huh, well, I'm clearly not that unique and not having too unique of an experience. So that was definitely interesting.
So let's see. Anything else about social identities, religion, class?
Um, so I am agnostic. And that doesn't really come up in my life usually, unless, coping with religious trauma and thinking about that doesn't really come up. And then social class, I'm definitely very low income. But yeah, I feel that a lot of my friends are also really low income as well, and so I don't think a lot about it other than like in terms of like, in a political sense. But in my everyday life, um, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that one either. I mean, it sucks. To not, I mean, to have to worry about like, okay, can I afford food? But I'm in a really fortunate situation now, because my parents, they will help me, but that wasn't what my upbringing was. Like I'm used to food insecurity and not knowing if there's going to be a roof over my head, and I think maybe that might change the way that I view my current, income. Is I'm grateful, so I because I'm used to having literally nothing. And even though, like, yeah, I make less than $2,000 a month, but I'm just so used to not having anything. I don't know. I feel really. I don't know. That whole thing just sounded really weird. But that's. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one either. I'm sorry.
I think it's hard to talk about class as it impacts you culturally and psychologically because we don't have a language to where we're not taught how to think about
Yeah.
in that way. I think about it in that way. We're usually, I think, taught to think about it in terms of our material needs being
Mm,
met rather than sort of the psychology of it and the culture of it. So I think it's incredibly hard for most people to talk about that. And especially like you said, you grow up
mm.
around people usually who are also low income.
Yeah.
So
Um, However, that did make me think of something though. So I feel that, socioeconomic status and also disabilities, like that's a really important connection because something that I've struggled with is employment because of my disability status. And I've never really struggled to get the job, but it's the maintaining the job because of discrimination in the workplace. Like I've had bosses who have called me stupid. I've been through a lot in work situations as a result of, not being accepted or accommodated and flat out being denied accommodations. Right now, things are better. Like I'm accommodated at work now, and it's interesting. I don't miss work nearly as much, and I'm not. constantly having panic attacks. Funny how that works, give somebody an accommodation and changes things. But and then also, not only was I receiving services through the Department of Rehabilitation, but I got an internship there, and like they helped me out with how to ask for accommodations and knowing my rights. And then I was offered a job at the Pride Center at American River College, and it's been a very autism friendly environment. Like they've been above and beyond with accommodating my autism as well as my PTSD. And I've not had a work experience like this before, and I'm really grateful. But I definitely feel that maintaining work has been difficult because of my disabilities, not just the autism, but the physical disabilities. Like I went into the hospital, I was in for like 8 days because I was having medical complications, and I was released from the hospital to find out I was fired from a different job. And it's just like, and then it's like if I apply for disability, if I start getting SSI, then I'm locked under this $2,000 limit. How am I ever gonna get a house one day? How am I ever gonna like afford what I need because I'm locked in this low income because of my disability? And then on top of it, if I'm visibly trans, I have to worry about getting a job too. And that was something that I've gone through in the past as well. Is I felt in order to be accepted at work, I had to conform and you know be this very specific, and it's like I had to like assure the people I was around, like, oh, by the way, I earned my pronouns, like oh yeah, I'm so masculine, I'm such a manly man, which is silly. That's so silly. But in order to be respected in workplaces in the past, I've had to really fight for it, and it did affect my work performance. So I feel that has definitely prevented me from earning a higher income. Just yeah, I would say that's yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's a there's a high unemployment rate among disabled people, and generally speaking, we don't give disabled people accommodations at work. It's a very sort of like, in our capitalist world, it's a very like if you don't fit into my version of what it means to make profit, um, to maximize my profit, not just make profit, then you know I don't need to. You don't get to continue to work there, right?
Yeah, and and I mean that's definitely the system working as intended. Like that's what it's designed to do. And it's either you force yourself to the point of literally breaking yourself to earn minimum wage, or and then people who are not able to hide their disabilities often don't even get the chance of getting through that interview. And it's yeah, it's just being locked into this system of poverty that is really repulsive. And so many accommodations are free, and there's like personally, like I have noise canceling headphones. I don't even have to play music. It just it emits a frequency that blocks out background noise, and it has made me able to go into grocery stores and shop by myself. I'm able to get through a work day. I'm able, like, and without that, I can't function. But it's just like, and that's so simple, like that's such a simple accommodation. And like the Department of Rehabilitation, they helped fund the headphones for me because I would have never been able to afford them because they were so expensive. And but yeah, it's just like this little tiny thing just changed my life. And then yeah, it's just being able to sit down, that's not going to impact my sitting down to work is not going to impact my work performance in a negative way. It's actually going to make it easier, and I'm going to be more productive. And but that's something that when in past work places, like just asking, like, can we have the radio lower? Can I have, an extra break? Or I need to sit down. I'm feeling dizzy. Um, it was, met with, I had a boss who would say, so what you're telling me is you can't do your job. And I'd be like, no, I'm saying I need this to do my job. And so, yeah, I am very angry over disability rights and the lack of accommodations and accessibility to, you know, basic survival needs because, you have to have money to survive, you have to work to survive. And then if that's cut off from people, well, what's the alternative? And, I'm very fortunate that my family lets me, I rent from them, I pay $200, and if I can't pay it, they work with me. And they'll just be like, okay, we're going to waive this. Don't worry about it. And there's so many people who don't have that. Um, and I definitely recognize how fortunate I am. But yeah.
Okay, would you mind elaborating on your sexual orientation some? You said that you identify as gay. Is there anything else you want to say?
So I am gay, but I'm also asexual as well. Somewhere in the asexual spectrum, demisexual might be a good descriptor. I joke and say that I'm just like playing demisexual on hard mode because it takes so much for me to become connected to a person emotionally to feel safe. However, I also know that my trauma can also affect that as well. But I think even if I didn't have trauma, I really feel that I would still somewhere be on the ace spectrum because I've noticed with talking with other autistic people, a lot of us are asexual, like a lot of us. And so I'm just wondering if this is just part of the way I am, and that being intertwined with, just my neurotype, which I think is pretty cool. Um, but uh, but yeah, I'm honestly not sure. I feel more in line with saying gay because I don't have to explain it. I don't have to explain it, and people don't challenge me on it. Weirdly, I've experienced a lot of strange hostility towards telling people that, like, people like getting upset with me whenever I disclose being asexual. Like, trying to convince me that I'm not asexual. You know, uh, Propositioning me to prove that I'm not asexual, which is interesting. Whenever I was younger, being gay was a lot like that. I met a lot of resistance, a lot of hostility. But as like I've gotten older and I'm here in California, I feel that I don't get the same reactions that I did like living in the Bible Belt. But weirdly, asexuality, I get asked invasive questions, about how do I do it then? And, like asking like people even coming up with like weird scenarios of like, well, would you do this? And that's been a big part of why I don't disclose my status as an asexual person. Um, because it's always like, do I have the time, energy, to deal with whatever series of questions this may, become. And because if I say that I'm gay, people are like, all right, you're gay. But, unless they're homophobic, then, just give me a weird look. But that's not to say that I don't experience hate for being gay. But it's just, I think it's different being where I'm at. Like, I live in California, I'm in Sacramento, and I surround myself with other queer people. And but still, for some reason, there's not a lot of discussion about what asexuality is. And so I think that evokes a very interesting reaction from people who probably need to do their own processing. So typically, like I don't talk about it. I don't mind talking about it for this interview, of course, but yeah, like out in the wild, whenever I'm talking to people, typically I don't say anything. I'm just like, okay, I'm gay, and really open about it. And so yeah,
How would you define asexuality?
um, I feel like for myself, is the only like I can only answer that for myself because I think so many people experience asexuality differently. Um, for me, it is a lack of sexual attraction. It's not something that's the first thing on my mind. It's like not even really on my radar until I feel very deeply connected with somebody. And then I want to, share in a bonding experience with this person, but it's not about the act of sex or the gratification that comes from the act itself. And so that's why I identify with being asexual is because it's that lack of sexual attraction. And it's also fluid as well, because, it all depends on, because every relationship we have, that dynamic is going to be different. And I think that if I am so emotion based, depending on who it is that I'm intimate with emotionally, that's going to change the way that I'm going to interact with them on a sexual level as well. So it's not like this very fixed, finite thing of, okay, I'm asexual, I do not experience attraction whatsoever. And oh no, I'm sex repulsed. It's not that at all for me, but for some asexual people, it is. And so yeah, my experiences with it are pretty much just my own, but yeah, I guess I would just sum it up as a lack of sexual attraction and something that is fluid.
And do you feel like happy that you figured that out for yourself, that you're on the ace spectrum?
I don't think it changed much. I think like out of all of the labels that I have found that have just like really um just impacted my life so much, I don't it gave me as it's kind of like a that's cool. I now have a word for that, but not so much as something that has impacted me significantly. Because it's not such a visible part of my identity. So it's kind of like I'm just explaining it to myself, um, and it just gives me like more introspection personally. So yeah, I don't feel like it had too much change.
What do you think the overlap is between being autistic and asexual?
I think it's because of the way that we because obviously autism is a spectrum and we are all coming from different walks of life. We're all our own individual, but I think that it's the same, probably the same reason that so many autistic people discover that they're non-binary is that if we're already on kind of the outskirts of society and we are viewing things from kind of like a bystander perception, and we're able to deconstruct these boxes that society has provided for us, and so it becomes easier to kind of categorize and process these labels and identities in a way that allistic people who are so ingrained in society and following these social cues, these social norms, aren't able to. I think it's just a way that we experience and view the world is different. So we are more likely to come out as asexual or discover that we're asexual or any other identity. Personally, this is my observation.
So it seems to me that there's a lot of, I mean, maybe it seems to me is not the right way to start that, but there is a lot of social pressure around sexuality and feeling like you should feel sexual and you should want to have sex and you should feel attracted to people in specific, in a specific way. Do you think that social pressure around sexuality is not felt in the same way by autistic people?
Could you repeat that last part one more
That
time?
social pressure
Mhm.
that people feel around sexuality, do you think that's not felt in the same way by many autistic people?
I think that I think that it is, and for myself, it definitely was. It caused sex to be a performative action, and it became so part of masking. That's also the experience I've heard other autistic people talk about as well. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm in a lot of groups online. I'm in a lot of online communities for autistic people, and this is something that has come up quite a bit, actually, just like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's people like making posts going, "Hey, do you all experience this too?" And but this is, the topic of sex as a performative action and being part of masking is a topic, and I think actually Devin Price's book Unmasking Autism talks a little bit about it as well. But I think that they only mention it briefly. But yeah, it's I feel that, there's a very big difference between performing the action and then actually experiencing that sexual attraction. So even though there might be the pressure to participate, it doesn't change the fact that somebody is asexual and then able to come to the realization that they are asexual and not experiencing that attraction. Hopefully, I answered that
No, that
well
makes a
enough.
lot of sense too. I probably have a follow up question, but I'm going to ask my next question instead.
Okay.
So, can you talk about what being a trans man personally means to you?
Um, let's see. I'm gonna have to take a moment to think.
Yeah, take your
Because
time.
this is a big one. It's something that's very bittersweet in a way. I, I, it's like I deal with unpacking the trauma of being forced to live an identity that I never wanted. But at the same time, I get to experience the liberation of claiming myself, and you know, it's just very liberating to push back and be authentically who I am. But it's also wrapped up in, like I said, that bittersweetness of you know forced conformity, and also the idea of lost time, and what if I could have transitioned sooner, or at least not had to live a double life, because I came out when I was really young. At least I tried to. I tried to come out before I even knew what the word trans was, and it didn't go well. Um, but yeah, it's weird. Like what it means to me. I mean, I'm a man, and but yeah, it's like yeah, it's hard to say. I don't really know how to answer that one. It's just an emotion that comes up. Is this like I'm proud of who I am, and I think that it's like this really radical form of self love to actually embark on that journey of transness and be authentically yourself. But yeah, um, it comes with a lot of difficulties of processing past trauma, processing the resistance that's felt from society, but still persisting. And yeah, so I don't have like a just like a very like concise answer on that one.
So, um, so if you would, how would you compare, or if you feel like you can, how would you compare the experiences with trans masculinity to the cis masculine experience?
Hmm. I think that's really hard to define, because I think that even cis men, they all experience masculinity in different and varying ways, and it's hard to like measure that and compare it because of that. Because I've met so many trans men who really embrace stereotypical ideas of masculinity and find euphoria in it. um, But for me, I have the most euphoria when I am, you know, really secure in, my identity of being a man, but yet I get to, in a way, kind of bastardize masculinity. My favorite thing to do is to do everything that is not masculine. Like I love the idea, like by society standards. Like the other day, like it was actually a couple of weeks ago, I had like fishnet stockings and high heels, but I hadn't shaved, and the amount of euphoria I got from that, because I wasn't a woman wearing those things. I was being myself. I was, it's like I just, it felt amazing. But to me, it was masculine because I was me. And so I don't know, masculinity is just so fluid and hard to measure. And I think that's even true of, cis men and, all trans men, like men in general. Like we all, like, it's so hard to quantify that. And I think that's, I don't know, I don't know. I don't have a right answer for that one.
Um, so can you talk some about also a big question?
Mhm.
So about your experience figuring out your identities and how people around you responded.
Yeah, this there's a kind of a long timeline of this. Like I've attempted to come out more times than I can count. Gosh, it was definitely it was definitely really hard as a kid. They had to hide all the scissors from me because I kept trying to cut all my hair off. I kept trying to put my hair under my hats, and I I just, and I didn't know what I was experiencing was gender euphoria whenever I would lift really heavy things, and I would, get to compete with the boys. And I always felt like I was in direct competition with them. Like I had to be stronger than them. And, and I didn't really understand why. And, I, the first time I chose a name for myself that was not my birth given name, I chose the name Ray, and I was maybe 6 years old. And my biological mother sat down with me and told me that I was making God cry, and that I was hurting her. And I didn't understand it because I was 6. Like I'm like, okay, why does God care? I didn't understand because like it made sense to me. Like, okay, I want to just do this. Like why can't I just have my friends call me this name? Why do I have to have long hair? Why am I not allowed to cut it? It did not compute to me whatsoever. And I think that the the guilt that she put on me really was a huge scar that lasted the like duration of my life, because it was not our first bout of disagreeing over gender. And but it was always, you're making God sad, you're making God cry. And then she'd start crying, and but never what she would never tell me why it was wrong. She would never tell me like what it was about it that made God cry. Just don't, because it's going to make God cry. And it confused me, and I would push and push and be like, well, why? And I was never told. And now I know, like in retrospect, that was because if she said it, I would I would then know that being another gender was an option, and that was her way of shielding that from me. But I didn't know I was trans, because that was not terminology I had access to. I was way too young, and I was definitely like processing this as a child would, and not having the vocabulary for it, and then also being a literal child. I There was no way I was going to officially come out, but I tried in the best way I knew how with the tools that I had, and that became a theme that carried on for years. I would do something that would not be feminine enough and it was pointed out. And I didn't understand why, and nobody would tell me why I was wrong. But then, whenever I got to be, this is a little embarrassing, but I started getting access to the computer whenever I was about 11, and I was really into anime. And I was on like anime forums and looking at fan art, and was just I loved it, but I started seeing people drawing character like boys together, and it didn't even register to me that they were different from me. And but I had like this longing, this yearning for that. And about a year later, I didn't really process it, but about a year later, I started watching an anime called Naruto, and it became my special interest. It is definitely my autistic special interest, and I I still am obsessed with it. Like I watch it every single day, but I started role playing as the characters in gay relationships, and it was my outlet. It was my escape. And I was writing fan fiction. I was writing like just stories back and forth with other people, and it was it wasn't until my friend a few years later said to me, he came up with a name for me. He started calling me Carlos, and I didn't like the name Carlos. It didn't fit me. But he would call me Sasuke, one of the male characters in the anime, and it felt like I don't know. It was just like the feeling that came with it. And he said, but one day we were role playing back and forth on Messenger, and he said, we can just be boys. And I was really confused. This one might actually choke me up. I might cry a little bit, but he was like, "We can just be boys," and I didn't know what that meant. And he said I didn't have to, I didn't have to be Sasuke. He didn't have to be Naruto. He said, you know, let's just be boys. And it was the first time I'd been given permission. I didn't know that meant I was trans. I just was like, okay, yeah. And he was a person who told me about binding. This was before like information about like being trans was very as accessible as it is today. So he and I both were like binding our chest with ace bandages, and I hurt myself pretty bad with it because I was sleeping in my ace bandages and stuff. I just couldn't take it off. I couldn't shower, but I always and I would just keep wrapping them. But I don't know for sure if there's any long term damage. I've always had pain in that area of my back and ribs ever since, though never had it confirmed whether or not I have damage. But it was so I was 15 when that happened, and I just started living this double life online where I was a boy, and I was just like, well, I can't really be one, but at least I can escape. And I had like my other friend, I asked her, I said, okay, I need you to give me a name. And she didn't even question it. She was like, your name's Alex. And I was like, okay. And so now I've changed my name legally to Alexander. I go by Xander though. Um, and it's just stuck with me ever since. But yeah, and I thought that was the closest I would ever have until somebody said to me, like mentioned like being trans, and I was like, what does that mean? They were like, hey, I'm FTM, are you FTM too? And I was like, what does that mean? I have no idea. And I was like, no, like what? um and I went and looked it up, and I just sat there and I sobbed. I was like, oh my god, I don't know what FTM is. I just learned it, but that's apparently what I am. Um, and I don't use that label now. I it's a little dated for me, but I'm just a trans man. Like that's but it I don't know, but yeah, that was my first time that I really realized it, and I tried to come out. It
How old were you at that time?
I was 15, 16 years old. And there was a lot of crying. There was a lot more of you're making God cry, and yeah, um, and I didn't care. I didn't care. I got to the point I was already wrestling with my faith, and it didn't make sense to me. Religion wasn't making sense, and I kept trying, but it just didn't work. But the resistance that I met at home just meant that I was living a double life. But abuse got worse. Like, I don't know if it was because I was trans, but there was definitely transphobic and homophobic comments that were made to me more frequently. It's funny, it's not funny, but you know what I mean. I learned slurs before I learned actual like LGBTQ plus terminology, um, because it was something in our household that just could be casually said. And it also, like in a retrospect way. So my biological father, uh, my mother was really harsh with him about not conforming to masculinity, and she used to whenever I would do anything that was really queer, she would just say the apple doesn't fall from far from the tree, and she would be upset. Um, and yeah, it was really sad. But I have to say, like my biological father was like he was garbage. He was a horrible person. And um, huge part of the abuse that I went through, but I do have to thank him for introducing me to a lot of gay culture without really meaning to. And because he would have these moments of clarity from religion, and he like introduced me to he introduced me to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, ABBA, and Barbara Streisand, and we would sing along to the songs together. And he showed me how to whip a fan properly. And I always wondered what he could be like if he had never had to repress it, or if he didn't have anybody calling him slurs. I wonder if he would abuse me the way that he did. Um, and it's sad that he would always deny it. Like he would always say he was straight. Um, but I remember hearing my parents fighting because my mother would just say, "I just why don't you just go leave me for a man?" And I didn't really understand because I was a kid. But that was why I heard slurs in the house before I learned what actual terminology was. Like, what does it mean to be gay? What is being trans? And so, yeah, it's pretty much that. I ended up on a whole tangent there, but yeah, I tried to come out quite a bit, but abuse got worse, and I started running away a lot and sleeping on couches of strangers as a teenager, because it was better than going home. And being trans and being young and being in the South was one of the worst things to be while running away and sleeping on at the couches of strangers I met online. Definitely opened me up to a lot of really bad things, but it was somehow better than being home.
So we left off and you were talking about your experience living on people's couches and
Mm-hmm.
meeting random people online.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about that before we move on about your experience with homelessness?
So, I never really registered it as homelessness because, I mean, I guess by definition, yes. But I don't know. I feel like it's a very personal thing that like it's something must be going on for me psychologically to accept it as that. I did have somewhere technically to return. I could go back home, but the conditions were so bad that I was just like, well, which is the safer option? Because at home, you know, yeah, there was abuse, but I also didn't have food. I didn't have water. And it was like living conditions, like physical living conditions were pretty deplorable. Um, so yeah, I I had to make the decision to just contact people to just be like, hey, will you come get me? And not really smart, but you know, teenage brain. I would tell people like, hey, can I hang out with you? Can you come get me? And then I would just have my bag ready, and then ask if I could stay the night, and then just keep staying. Um, but I was a teenager. It definitely opened me up to not safe situations. Some people were fantastic. Some people were really, really kind to me. Some people were not. But to say, you know, homeless, yeah, I had somewhere to technically return, but my safety wasn't really guaranteed. Um, So I didn't really experience homelessness in the way that a lot of people do.
So where did so you're referring to biological family and you're
Mhm.
adopted, right?
Yeah, so that is my biological family. I'm adopted now. Thankfully, I have a wonderful family now, and they're some of my biggest support.
And how have they responded to the fact that you're queer and trans?
Uh, Really well. Like for my 1 year testosterone anniversary, my mom baked a cake for me. Like they all like they just threw this big party for me, and they were like, invite as many of your friends as you can. We're hosting, and I have ever since I've come out, I've been a lot more social, so I have like a lot of friends, like a lot, and um. Whereas before I was kind of kept to myself. But yeah, I don't think my parents were expecting so many people to come in. And but yeah, we had barbecue, we had cake, and like they did awesome with pronoun changes, and started like trying to educate themselves because like you know having night like, so they have 9 biological children, and none of them have come out as anything LGBTQ plus. And so I got to be there first, and they had no idea what was going on. They're like, we don't understand this, but hold on, we're gonna find out. And so they did research. They like I've told them I don't mind answering questions. They've always been super respectful about it, and yeah, so it's been a good experience.
That's great. Uh, when was that party that you were just talking about?
It has been two, I think it was 2 years ago
And so I guess that the next question is, how old were you when you were fully out?
when I was fully out. 26. I was 26, so it's been 4 years. I had to do math for a second. My brain went blank. That's really simple math. I should have gotten that. So yeah, it took me a bit to start testosterone and so on. And but yeah, I I came out. It was funny how I came out because my mom knew something was up, and she didn't know what was wrong with me. She was just like, "Okay, you're depressed over something. There's something wrong." And I'm not a very conventional person, and neither is my family. And so my mom, like really late at night, came to my door, and she's knocks on my door, and I'm in bed crying over like, how do I tell them that I'm trans? What if it's like what my biological family like? What if they react the same way? And because they're Mormon, and I didn't know like what I didn't know if that was going to change the way that they viewed me. But my mom came to the door. I was in bed crying, being very dramatic, and just boohooing, not talking to anybody, not sleeping because I knew I couldn't hide it anymore at all. And so she comes in, she sits on my bed, but she has like a handful of peacock feathers. And she's like, I brought you a gift. Do you want to talk about it? And I was like, where did you get the peacock feathers? It's like I think it was like 10 p.m. And she said, well, there was a guy riding a bike with a bunch of peacock feathers, and I thought you might like them, so I bought them from him. Can you tell me what's wrong? And I just started crying and said, well, Mom, I'm a guy. And she was like, okay, where do you want me to put the peacock feathers? And she's just like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? And she's like, okay. And I was just like, that's it? And I was kind of upset that that was it. And so she like starts putting them in the vase and sits back down, and I started explaining it, and she was like, well, I figured there was something up. This isn't really a shock. And she was like, do you need anything? I was like, no. And she's like, okay, I love you, good night, and left.
Mm.
That was it. So it was really weird. And then I waited forever to tell my dad because I was convinced that he was going to flip out. His response was just, do what you got to do. That was it. And I was like, that's it? And he was like, yeah. Do you need something from me? Like, what? And I was like, okay. And he was like, well, I might accidentally misgender you. It's okay. You know, I don't care if you're trans. I'll do my best. I'll learn. And I was like, okay. And he did. He started practicing my pronouns. He doesn't really slip up at all anymore. Like he comes in the door and to be affirming, he'll be like, there he is, and just like wave at me and stuff. And so yeah, it's really nice. I'm really lucky. I do have like my siblings ask me stupid questions. Like one asked me if cisgender was a slur, and then he asked me if this means I'm straight now. And I'm like, what? How does that work? But it's okay. I don't mind. But they've been really great. But yeah, I'm lucky.
So where outside of your family have you found the most support and affirmation?
Hmm. School. Um, and I think that if I had started attending school like without there being like a Pride Center or a GSA, I don't think that would be the same experience at all. Like I really don't think that. So I started attending American River College in the spring of 2023. What year? Hold on. I lost track of dates.
I think that sounds right. We're in the
Yes,
fall of 2023.
perfect. I am so scrambled right now. It's all the emotional talk from earlier, probably. But yeah, so I started college in spring 2023, and during my first class, the like my professor mentioned that the Pride Center was opening up, and I was like, Pride Center? I bet there's a gay club. And so I went to the grand reopening of the Pride Center, and I asked, I was like, okay, do you have an LGBTQ plus club, and how do I join? And because of COVID and things had just been kind of a mess, and so many clubs had just disappeared, they weren't really sure. But I forgot how it was, but I finally found out where the GSA was, and that there was a GSA, and I went to the first meeting, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this was a thing. This is so cool. And I think that having a club really prevented me from giving up and dropping out when I got overwhelmed. Because it was a whole new experience. I was so scared, and I but like I had a reason to keep coming back, and I knew that I had support, and like now I've met like a good handful of like close friends. Like we see each other all the time, and it's awesome. And then I was offered the job at the Pride Center, and so I'm constantly, talking to students who are within the LGBTQ plus community. um, so it feels like we're not so much of a minority. I know that we are on campus. I know that, all of campus isn't, some form of queer, but in my little corner of it, it feels that way. And I feel that there's definitely safety in numbers, because, like, we do have graffiti that shows up in the bathrooms. We'll have like anti-trans messaging, like people write on stuff. And I've had classmates refuse to work with me, like on projects, but it didn't affect me nearly as bad because there was a GSA, there was a Pride Center, there was somewhere to go.
Do you tend to be out in the classroom?
um it's very difficult to hide the fact that I'm gay. Actually, right now I'm wearing a shirt that says "very nice and gay," and I have like a rainbow bracelet that I usually wear. um and I think that people kind of just assume that I'm gay, partly because of, dressing, in shirts that say very nice and gay. But I also will drop it in casual conversation because it is such a big part of my life. Um, but not trans. I will disclose that I'm trans in like queer spaces, but I do not in classrooms, um, because I don't fully feel safe. I don't know what the reaction from people will be. I don't know, you know, like how is somebody going to react? Is somebody going to hurt me? What if somebody finds out that I'm trans and then I'm in the same bathroom as them? Um, and even though I've been really fortunate to not have to deal with any like, overtly like, anti-trans, you know, actions towards me, I know that it exists on campus. I know that, it exists in society, and I don't want to take a chance. And so like I purposely choose bathrooms that are not secluded. I am very careful about, who I disclose it in front of, because it definitely I've gotten more, weird looks from being trans than I have being gay. And but yeah, it's not something that I broadcast. But that's for safety. I'm very openly trans in queer spaces, and like for example, one of my classes, there was a discussion that came up, and being trans was part of it, and I ended up mentioning, like, for the sake of learning, I was like, well, yeah, I'm trans, and here's my perspective. If we're going to talk about trans people, like, I probably should let you all hear from a trans perspective. And so I did, and one lady like started like some sort of like weird comment about how like, well, men can't have babies, and the professor shut her down really fast. um like okay, um like thanks for sharing with us, like that's not true, but all right, like have fun with that weird idea. But yeah, so I feel that I have a lot of support on campus. But
Was that a classroom that was not very queer itself? There,
um the professor is in the LGBTQ plus community, but the class was itself was not one of the Pride Learning Community classes. So I think that was probably why. But she handled it super well. Like the professor handled it super well. Like I think you might have some more education questions. So I'm sorry if I'm answering a question ahead of time. But there was a like she was using a template for like for the exams, the professor was, and some of the questions were really problematic, and she didn't even know that they were there. But she was really awesome about like getting like my opinion on them, and she asked me if I would mind rewriting the question and making sure that it because if you're going to ask a question about like what is gender dysphoria, um, probably have a trans perspective on that. But yeah, she let me rewrite it, and I was really thankful for that because the question was giving an example of like it was one of those like this person does blank and they experience this. What does this mean? And blah 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 blah. And it was like one of those, and it was misgendering a trans man in the example, kept calling him a woman, but yet was talking about gender dysphoria. And I brought it up to her, and I was just like, "Hey, do you know about this question?" And she was pretty upset over it too. Like she did not realize it was there. She apologized to me and she asked if I felt comfortable with rewriting it. And so I rewrote it, sent it to her, and I don't. I mean, I'm sure she did implement it in there now. But it was a really good response. I think that was a great response to have to something like that. Is not just okay, I will consider it. It was like, okay, you are the person who is affected by this. I'm going to put the power in your hands to tell me how we can do this better, and we're actually going to do it. And I thought that was great. And and she also her gender exercises for the class, we would have like group discussions. They went really well, and anytime somebody would try to say something transphobic, it was shut down really fast. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with it.
I've heard from students kind of similar experiences, not similar in some ways anyway, where they feel like when, that they've had the experience of queer topics being brought up in class, sometimes not as part of the curriculum, and then a lot of confusion sort of happens in the classroom because the way that the queer topics are being discussed is
Mm,
just inaccurate or problematic in
mm,
some way. And then some students have said that they have found that they have to, because some professors who try to bring up queer topics don't do it that well, they find themselves in a position of having to kind of teach the professor as well as the other students about
yeah,
queerness and about transness. Um, and that has felt like difficult sometimes anyway.
yeah. I think that it's a lot to expect somebody who's in the LGBTQ plus community to do the educating because like I personally I love it. Like I love explaining. I mean I that's something that I genuinely enjoy. But a lot of people they don't have the emotional capacity to deal with that. And I think that was a big difference between the way that the professor went about it with me was she asked me first, she was like, do you feel comfortable about this? And something that she did was because it was a psychology class, so we did talk about gender. She at the end of the lesson, she gave out a handout of LGBTQ plus educational websites, and it actually said on there, don't ask members of the LGBTQ plus community, Google is free, or something along those lines. And that was a great way of doing it. But yeah, and she was talking about like, if you're curious about it, here are some sources, go look it up. And I thought that was a good method of doing it. Other professors could do the same thing instead of, like, I don't think they should ask students to do the educating, especially if they're in an educating role, to put that, it's like they should, if they're going to be presenting this as part of the curriculum and they're going to be educating students about it, I think that they should have, gotten that reviewed by somebody in the community before presenting it to the students. Anyways, I hope I worded that weird. All right, I think I worded that a little weird, but but yeah, there's definitely ways of going about it, and there are LGBTQ plus people who are willing to proofread, who are willing to give their input, and doing that ahead of time. And I think that if you're going to be working with a diverse population, it's really important to familiarize yourself before speaking on something. Um, and, I think that it's helpful to also just say, this is not something I know a lot about. Here's a resource rather than a student. But I have not been in that situation yet. However, if I am, I definitely would be willing to explain and educate. But I part of it is I kind of take it as like kind of a duty because I do have the emotional capacity for it, and I know that a lot of my peers don't. And so I feel like if I answer and also say, hey, a lot of people are not going to want to answer this, but I will because that's just me. I'm weird. Um, but yeah, I think that goes a long way.
I think some students have expressed not just sort of, I mean, part of it is about emotional capacity and having to do this repeatedly
Mhm.
to correct things that are said that are inaccurate or problematic or even insulting in some way. Um, but it's, yeah, like I mean, you kind of said this a little bit, but the fact of having to correct, like, why are there so many misstatements, incorrect things that are being said about the queer experience that students find that they're in a position in the moment to either ignore it and move on or having to correct it.
Yeah, yeah, it is really frustrating because especially it's like, whenever an ally is trying their best and then doing, more harm than good by putting queer people on the spot and expecting them to be in an educating role, especially whenever they are the one who is an educator. I think that is, I mean, it's really not fair. And, and this might be a little bit of an extreme comment on my part, but I think that whenever you have somebody who's in a position of authority, putting a student on a spot to talk about one of the most vulnerable, like potentially one of the most vulnerable things about themselves, it creates a very like emotionally unhealthy dynamic, as well as that's not really a safe environment. And because like, also, what if that student isn't out? What if they what if they don't want to discuss the details of it and you don't know who you're in a class with? And that's part of why I don't disclose that I'm trans whenever I don't know who in my class is safe. Um, but I think that there are plenty of people that professors can have review their work, like, or the topics that they're bringing up that have to do with the LGBTQ plus community beforehand. Um, and that way, and it's just like, I mean, sensitivity training exists, but I don't think it's always the best. Like, I don't think they always do the most effective job. I think that there needs to be, more queer voices heard, but it is a really tricky situation because people who intend well, they want to bring up these topics and they want to make it an inclusive space and like, okay, I'm talking about something that's LGBTQ plus related, but in reality, what they're doing is just either outing people or bringing up really sensitive topics or focusing on tragedy of our community, not even realizing that, and while it's an important thing to talk about, we've gone through a lot of tragedy, but I think at the same time, whenever you've got a classroom and you have queer students who are there and you're talking about like some of the most horrific things as an educational point and you're not even using correct terminology, that's got to be triggering, that's got to be like in a way somewhat traumatizing. Sorry, I'm ending up on a whole tangent here, but yeah, I think that's I don't have a perfect answer for how to make it better, but I do think that reviewing beforehand from somebody in the community who has the emotional capacity and the willingness to educate is a step in the right direction. And also, asking people beforehand if they're even, like, are you even comfortable with this? Not even on the spot in front of people, is helpful. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, or I think a lot of times when queer topics are brought up, the in a class that is not focused on queerness, and maybe the faculty member might consider themselves an ally in some way, but that allyship can often be very superficial. Like it can be as deep as, oh, I'm not homophobic or I'm not transphobic, without having any kind of deep understanding or ever even having read a book, right?
Yeah,
Or ever consumed queer media in any real way, right? So it's
yeah,
like, if you're going to talk about queerness, realize that maybe it's something that you need to understand in a deeper way, and actually, even though none of us have time, take the time and put more effort into that part of your lesson plan.
yeah. In some ways, I think that it would be more effective to work on making sure your environment is safe. And while dialogue about our experiences is really important, but also making sure that, your LGBTQ plus students are feeling safe and supported, and you can do that in ways is that don't involve just bringing up, a topic for ally points. I think that that's the biggest thing is like, like if you have like a student, like, okay, like for example, like, um, let me think. Yeah, like Sherry Porter. Sorry, I don't know if I can just like say people's names. Sorry, I can cut that part out. So my English professor was so encouraging of me choosing topics that were LGBTQ plus related, and she was, I mean, she was encouraging of it. She gave me fantastic feedback, um, and that made me like it made me feel safe and welcomed. And then also, I had another professor who very similar. My one professor who told me about the Pride Center. She brought up to all the students. She was like, "The Pride Center is reopening." She didn't say it to one individual student, but she just let us all know. And I asked her about it like one on one, and she told me a little bit more information. And it I think that that is a really great way of doing it. Is just encouraging your students and also providing resources. You don't have to be an expert on the resources, but making sure that resources are available. And, it's just like, I think that that's a huge part of moving in the right direction. That's one of the best things an ally can do.
So, where do you find queer joy?
Community. It's something that has gotten me through. And I never really, so before I was fully out, like 100%, and living authentic, sorry, I'm like adjusting in my chair. Um, so community, yeah. Before I was fully out, I, I always felt like an outsider. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And I always felt like my interactions were really superficial. And then when I came out and I started having deeper connections with more people in the LGBTQ plus community, I felt like this sense of belonging in a way that like I had never felt in groups prior, especially like church. Like so I grew up in religious communities, but I didn't feel a part of it. And like there was this day that I looked in the mirror and I experienced so much gender euphoria. I thought to myself, wow, this is what I imagine people feel when they say that they are feeling the Holy Spirit because wow, I feel really divine right now. And it was because I couldn't understand that, but the moment I experienced gender euphoria, I felt it was like this I don't know, it was like this feeling that I it was like this completeness. It was this just I just felt so whole and just this euphoria that was building in me that I this is like what I heard people talking about in church. I'm like, oh, you all felt this for God? Well, I feel this for you know, filling in my pathetic little mustache with some mascara. Like, oh, who knew? Um, but then I found deeper connections, and on top of that, feeling that euphoria, and like I recognized myself in the mirror for the first time, and then I was not only recognizing myself in the mirror, but I was leaving my home, and people were seeing me as me, and I was seeing me as me, and that kind of brought down this wall that was between myself and everyone around me. And that gave me so much joy, and my friendships are stable, and they've been so beautiful. And like I've had several friends who I've helped them with their tee shots, like I've and all sorts of stuff like that, and celebrating whenever they have their milestones now. And um, it's so funny because at least in my friend groups, I feel like all of us, we're always looking for some reason to celebrate. And I think it's because so many of us have had really rough backgrounds as a result of being part of the LGBTQ plus community. And we have religious trauma or family trauma. And then getting to come together as this group of queer misfits, we find reasons to celebrate. And so I mentioned earlier my testosterone anniversary. My family threw a party. My friends then threw a party for my top surgery anniversary, and it was huge. We I'm allowed to swear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we called it Flat Fuck Friday, and everybody like I think like 50 people showed up, and it was so cool. Like we had music going. I got to have like my shirt off, and people brought me gifts. People were like doing artwork for me, and everybody was celebrating, and it was so cool. And I wish I'd show you pictures. If I had known I'd talked about it, I probably would have like printed out pictures to like show you. It was really awesome though. We had like trans flags and trans color streamers all over the place, and it was great. And that kind of like just sparked this trend of us just throwing parties for everything. And so every little milestone we would all have, it was a party. And and we're all part of the LGBTQ plus community, and so we get a lot of use out of those rainbow streamers, because like it's never just a regular party. It's always got to be queer, and that's a lot of joy. That's finding reasons to celebrate just being myself with other people who are being themselves. And yeah, it's a lot. It's that together. It's the togetherness. It's the community. And I, since I've been elected president of the GSA at school too, that's given me so much joy because I get to, I don't know, it's like I get choked up because like I get to help with organizing, events where people can connect with each other and people don't have to feel alone. And to me, that's what a lot of it's about. That's what, this gay and trans joy is for me, is just that deeper connection. And I want to make sure other people also feel connection and joy the same way that I have gotten to, especially because I know what the absence of that joy is like.
So, oh, I guess anything else you want to say about queer joy, anywhere else you find it?
It, there is, but I don't know if it's completely relevant. I mean, it is relevant, but I don't think it's going to make sense to many people. Um, so I mentioned about how Naruto, the anime, helped me with processing my gender and sexuality. I so I'm still a really huge fan of it. And by the way, you can totally cut this part out because this is just like this is really silly. But um, I love these characters so much, and I get to like draw them together in their happy gay relationships, and I get to draw them as being trans, and I get to project myself onto my favorite characters, and it's like I get to engage with this piece of media that I have always loved, and I get to put myself in it from like a spin of a fan perspective, and it gives me such like it gives me a lot of joy. And I know that might not make a lot of sense to people, but it's my autistic special interest. So the I have to control myself because I want to jump up and down and like squeal and flap my hands every single time I think about this anime. And I'm like, no, reel it back, reel it back. But being gay and trans has helped me enjoy it more. Even though it itself is not inherently gay or trans. Um, depending on who you ask. Um, and so yeah, that is something that has also I have found joy in.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because I don't want you to censor yourself, and I'm not cutting that out because it's where you find queer joy is where you find queer joy, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people share. Well, I don't know what like I think people want to hear a variety of ways that people like experience queer joy. So I think that's
Mhm.
key. Um, okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the classroom, I
Yeah.
guess, and then talk about in multiple ways, and then talk about oh yeah, I have a lot of questions. Okay. Actually, let's talk about disability and neurodiversity
Yeah.
some. Can you talk about how your disabilities impact your education and your learning?
Yeah. I would say, oh, hey, I have to pick which neurodiversity impacts what, because I got a lot of overlapping things. Um, so my anxiety, my PTSD definitely impacts my education quite a bit. I have to take way more frequent breaks, and I get really overloaded really quickly. And I have a lot of self-esteem issues with I feel bad that I can only do like two or three classes at a time, and I know that sounds silly that because like that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but because I know that if I do more than that, I'll just completely spiral and I'll burn out. And I and it's just like I hear other people talk about like, oh, I'm taking five classes, and whenever I tried to do that once, I did not make it through the semester. I lost it. I actually ended up hospitalized, psychiatric. I was so overwhelmed. This was not at ARC. So I was a lot younger. It was right after I got my GED, and they told me go take five classes, and I had never been in a classroom before. Um, Not a great idea. Uh, but I feel that it definitely means that I'm going at a slower pace. Um, and I feel a lot of guilt over that. I wish that I didn't, but yeah. But I know that I get physically overwhelmed, like I get very physically exhausted, and I have to take a lot of recuperation time. Um, and I've been very fortunate that professors are willing to, hear me out and talk to me. But I definitely have had a lot of communication issues where I take things very literally. Or if something is said very vague, I ask a million questions about it. And this is kind of going a little bit back. So I've tried a lot of different things. So I also went to cosmetology school. Um, And that was terrible because my instructors would tell me they wouldn't repeat things for me. They would just tell me I should get it. And I would keep asking clarifying questions. And I know that's not, ARC, that's not college, like the college that I'm at. It was a beauty college, but different type of curriculum. But um, I would get really frustrated because I was taking things very literally and I kept asking clarifying questions, and people would get frustrated with me. And I also hated it anyways. I just thought I should because it made sense. People told me that I should just go do hair since I dye my hair, and I was like, okay, sure. Um, I didn't want to. I wanted to, I really wanted to go get my associate's degree, but I thought I wasn't smart enough. But sorry, I'm kind of talking in circles there. But yeah, the biggest way that is impact my disabilities have impacted me is that I take a long time to complete things. Like the more and the more task I have, I just get scrambled. But yeah,
Can I ask, just if you don't mind me interrupting,
oh
why do
yeah,
you take a long time? So what is it, a combination of your disabilities? Like, so
yeah,
if you had to explain, 'cause one thing I think I would like more training on and education on, and
mhm,
I imagine that other faculty would like the same or need the same, is understanding. It's a lot to understand, but at least
yeah,
understanding diversity of our students' experiences with disabilities and being neurodiverse, and at least trying to accommodate our students as best we can with more knowledge. And I think that knowledge has to be more nuanced and has
mhm,
to take into account our experience, the experiences our students have in different ways with different disabilities, basically.
yeah. So a lot of it is communication, and something that I have found is people think that I understand things a lot more. I think that in the past I've had professors like look at my grades and just assume that, oh, I don't need things explained to me. I've maintained like straight A's throughout since I started, and so they look at like my work and they'll just kind of assume that, okay, I get it and I don't need that extra help, but I do need things explained to me in different ways. And whether it be like autistic miscommunication or, or my anxiety, like, for example, whenever I can't figure something out, I'm like, okay, I have to come up with all of the different and possibilities that this could possibly be, and I will do all of them, and I will present all of them. And then if one is wrong, that's okay, I'll have another one. But then what if I'm wrong because I have both of them? Oh no. And then I've had times where I've submitted multiple assignments because I couldn't get the clarification and it took me significantly longer because I was like, I don't want to fail, but I keep asking a question, but I'm told, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine, or the person will just repeat it and I will need it explained to me in a different way. Um, so far, I've never had anybody like take points off for submitting too many assignments. Um, but I get like this panic where I just freeze and I can't do anything until like there's oh,
Oh, excuse me. That was on Do Not Disturb, but somebody broke through. Do Not Disturb. Sorry
oh,
about that.
if you have an iPhone, if they called twice in a row, it goes through.
That's my sister. I'll have to edit this out. She does this. Okay, I'll have to edit that too out because I'm just gonna hear me talking about her. Okay, sorry about that.
It's all good. So yeah, it's like I feel like I take so much longer because I'm jumping through all of like these like mental gymnastics to try to guess between the lines of allistic communication, and then like on top of it, whenever I'm mentally stressed, it physically impacts me because of the medical conditions that I have. So if I have like a panic attack, I usually will end up with a health flare up. Like the other day, so in my public speaking class, this is so embarrassing, but I had a panic attack, I threw up, I tripped on somebody, and I dropped all my note cards, and ran out of the room, and I didn't come back. And which is funny because like it's not like I've never given a speech before, but it's like it's weird in a classroom setting. I but because I had that panic attack, I then started dealing with vertigo because my health started flaring up, so the room started spinning, and I was like, "Oh my God, everything is spinning." And I kept trying to talk through it, and I was like, "Everybody knows that I'm messing up. Everybody knows that like I'm dizzy right now. They can't know I'm dizzy." And then all of a sudden, my stomach just started, "Ugh." And I was like, "I have to go." And I started running, trying to not get puke anywhere, and tripped over somebody. It was so bad. It was one of my most embarrassing moments. But yeah, it takes me longer to recuperate. I spend a lot of time having to physically rest, which takes time out of doing homework because I'm either in chronic pain or I'm having panic attacks, or if I am dealing with my PTSD stuff. I not so much lately, but thanks to therapy. But like I used to have like constant night terrors. I was going days without sleep and then trying to do my schoolwork. And and so that definitely impacted the speed at which I got things done. So I don't really know if I have any solutions for what professors can do, but I think just being willing to elaborate and explain things in a variety of ways is very helpful. Also, something that my English professor did was she would give me warning before any changes were about to occur. So she was very good at being like, okay, we're going to have a group activity. Here is what it entails. And she would give me warning so that I didn't have to hear all of the chairs scooting across the floor. And she would let me go out of the class with my group into an empty classroom so that we could have privacy, like not privacy, but quiet. Um, like, for example, like how much like overstimulation, sorry, I have to readjust here. So before I was taken out of school entirely, whenever I was a kid, I was enrolled in kindergarten to fourth grade, then taken out, and then I was not put in school again. But during fourth grade, kindergarten through fourth grade, what ended up happening was I was so overstimulated and I was having autistic meltdowns. I was hitting myself, biting myself, and because the noise was so much, I couldn't play with other kids. I they put me in special education. They didn't know what to do with me because I was so overstimulated. I refused to do the work. I couldn't do it. And so I just didn't get a good quality education. But now I have like good noise canceling headphones, and I can you know, articulate that, this is what I need a lot better than I did whenever I was younger. And also being like knowing how to ask for specifically autistic accommodations, okay, I need warning, I need, to use my headphones in class. I need a clear, direct communication definitely has gone a really long way. But I I think that that works for me, but I don't know how that works for other students who are also on the spectrum who might not be able to advocate for themselves. And I think that professors reaching out to DSPS and asking them what they can do, even though I've had some bad DSPS counselor experiences, not everyone there sucks. And there are I think that getting professionals involved in like how do we make this space the most accommodating would be a good idea because I don't think a lot of professors do really understand. It's not a student being lazy, it's not a student being flaky or just being unreasonable. Thankfully, I've not had to deal with that. I've been very careful to choose my professors before I enroll in the class. So I haven't had any real struggles. I had one who had like a very intense workload that was a little much, but she was fine. She was fine. It was just a very there was not enough hours in the day to possibly get that much reading done. But got through the class. But yeah, pretty much that though. I think that being aware that there are students who cannot ask for accommodations because they don't know how, and also they're not diagnosed. I'm like really fortunate that I got an autism diagnosis. Most people don't, especially considering I was assigned female at birth. The fact that anybody even recognized me as autistic as a kid was shocking. An autistic girl in the 90s diagnosed with autism, that's not common.
Yeah, from a
Um,
low income background
yeah,
too.
low income. Yeah, we lived in like a like really bad, really bad area. Grew up in a pretty rough trailer. Didn't have money. Didn't have like, but it was the school kept pushing. We think this is autism, and but great, you have a label, but how do you accommodate that? And if you don't understand autism, how do you accommodate something you don't understand? So I didn't get the accommodations that I needed to be able to thrive. Um, but yeah, I think that that's even true now. I think that just awareness of neurodiversity in general is a good step in the right direction, and also knowing that students are not going to like just because a student doesn't have a piece of paper saying that they're diagnosed is not is not an indication that they don't need help. And we're all going through something as well. And I think that, most people do have some form of neurodiversity, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think that everybody has something to gain from making education accessible to those with disabilities, whether it's physical or mental, because it's it's just like everybody is going to be impacted by a disability at some point in their life, whether it's temporary or not. And if we don't have that accessibility, we're doing a huge disadvantage to like a large population of people. And community college is supposed to be accessible. It's for people who don't have a lot of income. It's for people who might be impacted in some sort of in like a variety of ways. Might scramble my wording on that, but you know what I mean. But
Well, also, I think there are more autistic students at the community college level too. So
yeah,
it would behoove, I mean, it behooves everybody to know more about
yeah,
accommodating autistic students in education. But at
yeah,
community college, where we see more autistic students, we should
yeah.
have more knowledge and training.
Yeah, something that obviously I'm not in a teaching position. This is nowhere near the same thing, but something that I noticed because I am autistic. Whenever we were having the GSA meetings, I was noticing that a lot of the students were fidgeting and struggling to sit still and they were stemming. And so I brought it up like, what if we got paper and art supplies and like fidget toys to put along the tables while we're getting through the agenda? We got through that agenda so much more smoothly. It was fun for everybody and people had fun and we got really good feedback on it. And I think that like I've never had a professor say that they don't want me fidgeting with things. But I've had friends who have said that they've had professors think that they were just, goofing around and they weren't taking it seriously and were a little harsher with them because of it. And even if they're not outright saying, hey, you can't do this, it doesn't mean that it's not being discouraged.
Or
And
it's
just,
not affecting how the professor is viewing that student if
yeah,
they don't understand why it's happening, even if they're
yeah,
not saying anything.
yeah. And that's something that so one of my really good friends, both of us, whenever we're in order to process information, we have to be doing something. We have to be stemming. We have to be doing something, whether because I'm, also having ADHD. Like both of us have ADHD, and we're also autistic. So I've had really awesome professors who are like, "Yeah, I know you have to doodle in class in order to function, but I've had one experience. It was a temporary. It was a temporary person who I don't think really understood what I was doing, and he just kept looking at the fact that I was not looking at him, and I was like, he's watching what I'm doing really intensely. I don't think he wants me to do this. And so like I put my notebook away and I'm like, okay, I won't draw right now. I think he's upset. He never said anything, but I definitely felt awkward, and so I can't say for sure. That's just it. I could be reading body language wrong, but I definitely felt I felt a little judged.
Well, I had an experience, and I feel bad admitting this, but where I didn't understand noise sensitivity at
Mm,
all. And students who have had headphones on,
mm,
I've made negative assumptions, and I've asked a couple students to take their headphones off without asking why they have them on in the
mm.
first place, too.
Yeah, I think that that's also something that, if people have awareness of, like, for example, like my headphones, they emit a frequency that blocks out noise that, like, so I can hear everything, but the chair's scooting, it blocks it out. Anything that's like behind me from too far of like things that are with outside of a certain radius, it's muffled. And I can actually hear and focus on whatever the professor's saying way better. And I think that's becoming more common. A lot more headphones are having that ability, and so I think because of that, I think more people are going to start using them, and we're going to start seeing them in classrooms.
Have you taken classes that are queer and trans inclusive in terms of the topics that are covered? And why do you think it might be important? So, two questions in one for you. And why do you think it might be important for classes to be queer and trans inclusive?
So I have. So I'm actually taking. So American River College has the Pride Learning Community. That is, these are classes that are. Well, you're very familiar with it, I'm sure. Classes that are taught by a professors who are in the LGBTQ plus community, and the curriculum is not solely about being LGBTQ plus, but is very LGBTQ plus friendly, and having that it's like they're creating like this safe space. And I do have to say I have felt very safe in one of my classes because of the efforts that the professor has made. We are not required to write about LGBTQ plus topics, but we are encouraged. And like one of my speeches was about how I discovered that I was gay and trans. And it was really nice to have that just being very affirmed. And my I didn't have to worry about my classmates being like, oh, that's weird. Like people were telling me afterwards that, oh, that resonated with me, I relate to that. And creating an environment where students can feel safe enough to share those experiences and allow them to connect with each other in a safe environment, in a classroom environment, because we're supposed to be learning, but we in order for learning to take place, a student has to be safe. You can't expect a student who's going through crisis and instability, like many LGBTQ plus students are, to be able to perform well if their basic needs are not being met. And basic needs is safety. And it's more than just being, proud of who you are. And it's not like we're just, creating a clique, but we're creating it's like whenever we engage with each other in spaces where we can talk freely about our experiences, we are creating an environment that is accepting and safe. And that is so important to being able to learn. So one of the best things that professors can do for students is that, like, just, you know, it's yeah, like let LGBTQ plus topics thrive. Like let students write these things, celebrate it with them, and I think that's really important. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about sharing, resources. If a professor is not part of the community, they can at least share resources for where students can get connected. Um, but yeah, I think that as far as bringing up LGBTQ plus topics in curriculum is it's not just important. I mean, it's genuinely necessary because people are going to people have not had the opportunity to really learn about it in like an academic sense, and like a lot of people haven't, because it's not something that is just freely available, to just discover. Like I had to go and discover what it meant to be trans online, and even though times are changing and we see more gay and trans visibility, do we see it really in an educational sense? And like it's I don't know, it's very empowering to give people terminology and to know their history. Like there are so many topics. Like we had and like the event that we had the other day about it was the LGBTQ plus trivia. There were people who actually did not answer, like people in our community who got the answers wrong for what the Stonewall riots were about, and that was really surprising. And I think that when people get to know about history and about like of their community, it does create a sense of pride, but also it's very motivating to understand the importance of that connection of what we have today as well, and also lets people know that we have always existed, and that gives a hope that we always will be as well, and that we are making progress going forward. And that's something that's easy to lose sight of. And we shouldn't be made to feel invisible. And I think that when we learn about history, like like LGBTQ plus history, that's no longer making us invisible. Like we are. Yeah, I lost the words for it, but pretty much that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you when you say if people don't know about Stonewall, that indicates something about how their entire education careers have not included queer history, because if there was any queer history, usually the first thing that you learn about is Stonewall. And so either that was just totally excluded, or it was touched on so briefly that, and gone, so superficially that it's hard to retain much from that, right?
Yeah, a lot of what I had realized was that people were thinking that it was like it was they were let me think how to I think one of the options I'm trying to remember what one of the question options were. I think it was something along the lines of the first Pride parade, and that was what people were selecting for the answer. And yeah, I think that was that's an education thing. Like that was either not talked about, where it was just completely just glanced over. They didn't go into enough depth. And yeah, it's a very big disservice to LGBTQ plus students. And um so yeah, it's pretty much I think that's my answer on that one.
So I think right now the only class that is wholly focused on queer topics is the queer studies class
Mhm.
for campus. Sometimes there's a queer lit class. I think there might be, or an LGBTQ lit class. Sometime there might be an art history class in the making, which is great as part of the Pride Learning community. But if we could offer more, and I think we can, if we could offer more courses that focus entirely on the queer trans experience, and you use your imagination, what would you like to see?
Hmm.
I could lead you a little bit, but I don't know
I
if I need to.
Give me a second to think about this one.
Like queer disability studies, like
That would be
that's a leading
awesome.
thing, but it's hard to imagine when you haven't had it, right? Like it's hard.
Yeah,
So like thinking about intersectionality, your own identities, just sort of what in the world there is to learn, queer health,
yeah. I Because there is a lot. I think that's what's making it difficult to choose. I think that, well, what you said about queer health. is something that I think is very necessary. But we talk a lot about history, but there's a lot that's also going on present day, and something that I'm really passionate about is access to information, especially about sexual health, because that was something that was never really talked about when I was growing up, and something that is really overlooked with the LGBTQ plus community. Like, we have to learn these things in not always the best way. And if we're talking about health in general, like LGBTQ plus health, that opens up the topic of talking about, the the sex safety. And even though it wouldn't be just a sex ed class, it's just there's a lot, and because you can even go into with this, like there's a lot that people don't really understand about intersex people as well, and having that representation, and rather than just as a statistic. And I think more people would realize that being intersex is way more common than what people think. It's, people think, oh, they just think of like, oh, this tiny percentage of the population, when that's not even true. Because
What's the
it's,
statistic? Isn't it something
yeah,
like the number of redheads equals is the same?
yeah,
That's what people say.
yeah, it's like, I could be totally wrong, but it's like four, oh gosh, I don't want to say the wrong one.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I was trying to think. It's like four is like, it's like, I can't remember if it's like
I don't remember
zero
statistics.
4% or something like that, but it could also be outdated. But yeah, I think that is really important. But having, because here's the thing, like, how do you talk about our bodies in a way that isn't just cold and clinical, but also provides education? And that's something that, like, I have found even in LGBTQ plus, like books, is, the way trans bodies are talked about is not always the greatest. And these are things that are really, really important. And students who are going into medical, whether they are looking to become a doctor or a nurse or an EMT, they need to know these things. And to have this taught in a inclusive way is incredibly important. And there's a lot of myths around, whether, it's dealing with trans people or intersex people, but even, there's still fear around HIV and gay people. There's still to this day, and a lot of people don't even know that PrEP exists. And these are like, so yeah, an LGBTQ plus health class would be really beneficial, and and yeah, I think it could make a really big difference for medical professionals that, or like, future medical professionals. It could potentially even save people's lives. Because there's been so many horror stories in the news about, I mean, like, at least in trans spaces, LGBTQ plus spaces, of medical neglect of LGBTQ plus people, and mistreatment from like EMTs even. And if we can have more of a focus on, queer experiences, queer bodies, and so on, we can maybe combat some of that misinformation and also blatant neglect. So I agree with that 100%. And yeah, so I'm trying to think, like, what other.
Actually, I think I want to, before we run out of time, I want to ask you a campus question, if that's okay.
Oh yeah,
I know that we're definitely running out of time, though.
sorry.
And I know I want to, there's so many questions I didn't get to, unfortunately. That's always how it is, but I would like to have. Anyway, so what do you think the college should do to make trans and queer students feel more included and welcome?
So I'm going to need a second to think about this one. There's definitely been a lot of progress that has been made. However, I I really like the idea of the Pride learning community. I think that if possible, that being expanded could make a difference. But I think that responses to responses to hate speech on campus could be a little bolder. One of the things that whenever I first started at ARC, there was just kind of like back to back incidences of graffiti in the bathrooms of just anti-trans messages, and the school put out a notice saying, "Oh, there was graffiti found. We don't tolerate hate." But what are you doing besides just a mass email out? And they didn't tell us what bathroom, um, which is necessary because if you've got trans people who are trying to be safe, they're going to want to know what bathroom not to go into. They didn't even tell us, like, is it the men's bathroom? Is it the women's bathroom? Is it the gender neutral bathroom? What building on campus? And so something that we did during the spring semester, the GSA, was we did a trans art day, and we had a pretty decent turnout for being so small at the time. It was 10 people, and it's continued to grow this fall semester. But we did trans art that was we hoped to display it on campus. We didn't get a chance to, but we tried again this semester, and we had so much art we couldn't even put it all up because we didn't have enough room for it, which is awesome. But I think that if campus is more involved in activities like that was a student organized event. Like, if the college were to help us doing more and more like events, more, like making being LGBTQ plus more visible, um, I think that that would send a much stronger message that it's not tolerated compared to like an email just saying, hey, some graffiti was found. Um, like, support the students through events, support them through making even more space for them. Um, Basically, just more action.
What about bathrooms?
We don't have enough gender neutral bathrooms. Um, and you, I am fortunate. I have not been misgendered in a bathroom. I haven't had any bad experiences, at least not relating to being trans. But working in the Pride Center, I hear students talk about how they don't drink any water on campus all day, and they don't eat, they don't drink, so that they don't have to use the bathroom because they cannot always get to the gender neutral bathroom. There's always somebody in there. Um, and so to avoid having to go into a gendered bathroom, they're just getting dehydrated and starving because they're scared. And that makes me so angry. I have so much anger around it. Um, but yeah, it's certainly an issue. Like, I think having more gender neutral bathrooms accessible, and also people don't know where they're at even. Like, we only have a few on campus, and people people keep like, whenever we mention them, people will be like, "Wait, there's a gender neutral bathroom." Yeah, there's only a few, but yes, there are. Um, and I think that having more spaces for that is really important. Um,
Maybe put the all gender bathrooms on the campus map.
yeah, I noticed that with City College. I was looking at the map. I was like, oh my gosh,
Oh, do they list them?
yeah,
Oh, that's good because I was looking at the ARC map recently and I didn't see them.
yeah, I don't have
But
it.
it's funny, I asked operations once to tell me where they were all.
Uh-huh.
And so they created a map specifically to send to me that had the, but the general map that you can find online does not have them.
That sounds like something that the Pride Center could probably push for.
Yeah. And also there's a very big resistance so far to to all gender multi-stall bathrooms.
Yeah, yeah, there's a really big resistance to that, and Yeah, so I'm not really holding my breath on that one. Although it would make things safer for trans people. I mean, in theory, it would. But yeah,
It's the
I
cheapest option too.
yeah, it is the cheapest option, and so because I certainly know, like I avoid the men's restroom at all costs, mostly because it's gross. It is so nasty.
And then, so final thoughts. You just have literally 2 more minutes left, but
Okay.
any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't have um, like an idea of how much our community is actually struggling. Because rainbow capitalism is something that we're all familiar with. We have the pride parades, and companies will say, "Hey, we're an ally," but I'm being very vague here because I don't want to share anybody's experiences. The amount of students that we have come through the Pride Center who have stories that mirror my own and need additional help and resources, like these are young people who have been abandoned by their families, who do not have the life skills and resources that are needed because nobody taught them. And so this is like an entire demographic of people who have been completely neglected on so many different levels. And it's just like it's really easy to say, like, okay, yeah, gay rights, look, we've made so much progress, but we haven't made progress for everyone within our community. And investing in that, a lot of people, they don't have the opportunity to hear about you know young gay people, young trans people talking about being afraid to go home. And because it's like, oh, that's a thing of the past that doesn't really happen so much anymore. And it does. And I think that allies forget that. I think that, the broader society forgets that. And, you know, housing resources like shelters for LGBTQ plus people, it's not like we don't have enough. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough space because it's an entire group of people that have been so incredibly overlooked. And something that I think that I'm kind of circling back around to another question is, what can campus do? But the same exact services that Beaver Cares provides is these are things that so many of the students need, like so many of the students in the Pride Center need, but they need that. They're coming to us for it because they're too scared to go to Beaver Cares because they don't want to have to tell somebody, "Oh yeah, I'm scared to go home because I'm trans." They come to us because they're like, "You get it. We're going to talk to you." Like programs and assistance and resources for those students is so imperative. Like, yeah, it's a smaller number of students compared to like the cishet students, but that's still an important, like they're still important. They still belong at that school. And if we're going to have signs around the campus that say you belong here, then we need to start investing in the LGBTQ plus students that are struggling because of their identity. It's more than just their, it's like, yes, they're socioeconomically impacted, but why? Why are they, like, why are they struggling with food insecurity or housing insecurity? Oh, it gets back because, they're LGBTQ plus and don't have support, or nobody taught them the skills that they needed because their families were negligent, because they're LGBTQ plus. That's going to change the way that they need to receive those services. So yeah, that is, I would say just invest in LGBTQ plus people.
Thank you.